From the lowest to the highest, from the furthest to the nearest, from the smallest of the smallest to the greatest of the greatest, yoga is about all of life, everything we do, all of existence. My name's James Bogue. Welcome to the Whole Life Yoga Podcast. Hello, Claire.
Hello, James.
So today I'm with Clare Nicholls again, and I thought it might be nice to ask you, Claire. We're going to be doing this program in the mountains in Switzerland in May, and there's a reason that you've chosen to do a program in the mountains. And I'd like to ask you why you chose this venue and what it means for you to practice and explore these teachings in that type of setting.
So the idea of doing, there are many reasons, obviously, but the idea of doing an immersive retreat, I was looking for a setting where nature would very much be a partner in that experience. And I also am a great believer in an immersive retreat being something where the focus is on what we are exploring, or like the content of the retreat in terms of the teaching. And I wanted an environment that was conducive to that. So for me personally, I find it much easier to study when I am surrounded by nature. I find it much less distracting than when I'm in a city. And from a practical perspective, apart from the sheer beauty of this place, which I'll talk about in a moment, it's extremely close to Bern, the city where I live, and it's on the edge of the Bernese Alps. So we're going to be sort of almost in the foothills of the mountain. So we will be in the valley when the mountains will be surrounding us. And again, this for me has always been a place where it has potential. Like it has that sense of being both a very contained and safe space where you feel held by nature, but also it has the possibility of these great heights that surround you. So from a practical perspective, as I say, it's about an hour outside of Bern-ish, and public transport, easily accessible by public transport, which I thought might be attractive because part of what makes this particular immersive program very special is the idea that people can come to stay on site in the traditional, it's a traditional Swiss farmhouse. So it's extremely unique in terms of its architecture. And so you have people can stay on site, and the venue itself has a beautiful, obviously the room in which we'll be practicing asana and potentially doing any indoor activities is incredibly light. It's lit from two sides. There's also just an area, I suppose in English you'd call it a snug. I have no idea what the Swiss word for snug would be, but it's like a snug. And it's this place of natural satsang. So it's a place of natural community where people sit and talk. And again, this was very important for me, thinking about having an immersion where people are growing together, exploring together, inquiring together, and possibly getting quite raw together as well, because these aren't necessarily topics or ideas which we think about in a light way. We can fun and engaging and enjoyable, but not necessarily light. So it has to be a space that allows people to get deep and to feel that they can be with each other. The location, we have directly next to us one of the famous mountains in Switzerland, or semi-famous, which is called the Nissen. And the Nissen is, sometimes it's referred to as the Swiss pyramid because of the shape. It's about 1,700, a little bit more than 1,700 meters high. And it's about a 7-hour hike from the retreat venue or the immersion venue up to the top of the Nissen, but it's totally doable. And I think that would be an incredible experience. We also have the river Kanda, that runs down the valley into the Lake of Thun, which is, the Lake of Thun is very nearby. So we're surrounded by mountains, by water, by forest, by grass. So, and it's this sense of, I was going to say, it's like the idea of going a little bit outside of society to immerse oneself in a teaching or a topic in somewhere that has beauty and space and quiet, but it's not so far away that it feels intimidating. And also, just as a completely side issue, I really liked the idea of doing an immersion in Switzerland, because I live in Switzerland, and many of my students live in Switzerland, and I thought it would be an honor to bring you to Switzerland rather than us to you. And from an environmental perspective, this is center of Europe. It's an easy place for people to get to by train. So I thought this was a potentially very nourishing for us as students, but also at least there's no serious carbon footprint as well, which I was thinking about. Now, the other thing that I particularly liked about this venue in regards to the way that you like to work, James, I know that it's like the idea of an immersion, everything you do is immersive. Like the way that you teach, the way that you encourage people to experience the teachings in the environment around them. I felt this would be a particularly inspiring environment for the way that you work. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, about how like the nitty gritty of how you work with the environment?
Well, Claire, I mean, I think what you mentioned before, nature really is the guru, nature is the teacher. I had the privilege of teaching in the mountains in Spain for pretty much 10 years, I think, up till 2019. Maybe it was more like 8 or 9, but it was every year for quite a few years. And I was very fortunate to be able to spend quite a lot of extended time in the Spanish Pyrenees in Aragon. And my friend who built the center there, before I ever went there, he said, this was in India, he said to me, James, you must come, but you must come for at least 2 weeks the first time. And we were with another friend, and he says, what if you can't come for 2 weeks? And he said, well, of course, you can come for a day, you can come for a weekend, but really, you must come for at least 2 weeks. And the first time I went there, I stayed for 20 days, I think. And it was really interesting, because about 2 weeks in, I noticed something shifting. I noticed my relationship to the earth, to the land, changing. And the following year, I think I was there for maybe 7 weeks in the summer, and again in the autumn time for a week or so. And that really, my relationship to the land there really, and the environment there really developed. And the following year, the third year I went, I realized, this has changed. My experience here up to now has already changed the way I relate to the elements, and I relate to the land and the environment wherever I am. It's changed me. And the way I walk on the earth, the way that I cultivate yoga in all sorts of activities. So the principles that we were exploring in these retreats, in that environment, what I experienced again and again, when we would go out on these beautiful meditative hikes, it's that the teachings would all land in a different way. Just being in that environment, I find so refreshing, rejuvenating. It allows us to connect to a different type of rhythm very quickly. And so, for example, if one goes to a tropical venue and you have the sun comes up around 5 or 6, depending on the time zone, and then it goes down 12 and a half, 13 hours later, and you've got the ocean and the tide. This is one type of environment that can bring you very quickly into rhythm. And I think what I've also experienced in mountains, and I've been fortunate to go to various places to do work in the mountains, when you have a river as well, it's like there's so many ways that you can see in the environment this rhythmical, cyclical quality of life. And for me, yoga reminds us that we are pulsating beings and we live in a cycling existence. Everything is cycling, everything is pulsating. This is the nature of nature, being that which is born. And we are born and we will die. And in between those two changes, we'll experience this constant change, but it's constantly pulsating. And one thing that really resonates for me is that when we bring ourselves into rhythm, we can invite an expansion of our awareness, and it really helps us see more clearly, dive deeper into who we really are. So there's a beautiful idea in the Upanishads that talks about the nature of existence as being Satya, meaning it's real, it's true, it exists, it is. It's bṛhat. This is a difficult word to translate, but it's interesting. Etymologically, it's related to the English words right and rhythm. So yes, if we are truly present, fully authentically ourselves, then we're in rhythm. And you look into the natural world and you look at the plants and the animals that live in the wild, they naturally live in rhythm and they express their own unique beauty. And sometimes as humans, we forget that. Like if we look and see wild animals, they're all in good shape. They know how to eat. But how many human beings have you met that really knows how to eat, really got it dialed in? I don't know if I've met anybody like that. Maybe a handful, I'm not sure. But the animal is still in contact with that deep intelligence that is part and parcel of our sense and action capacities. And as human beings, we sometimes, our connection to that, what we might call more broadly the pilot of conscience, it gets clouded over, shrouded and veiled by all our conditioned ideas that then get enmeshed with our hopes and fears and our woundings and our aspirations and all the rest of it. And so any type of practice that helps us come into greater presence and greater rhythm can then help our awareness become more bṛhat, vast. So this idea, Satya bṛhat. Life is, experience is, consciousness is. But it has, when it comes to manifestation, it has a rhythm. But when we come into rhythm, then we can experience the underlying vastness of our true self. And what I've experienced over the years is that when we're in a beautiful mountain setting with lake and river and the mountains and the trees, and we can see the change of the season, and we walk in that environment. And when we walk in the mountains, there's this I remember one of the years I'd been in Spain in the mountains for quite a long period. And when I left, I was in a place that was rather flat. And it's like my body was, and it felt uncomfortable because it wasn't getting, in the mountains, every step is stimulating, every step's an education. And so meditative hiking, I've found it to be a very cleansing practice, because when we're surrounded by the vibration of life, I've been to a retreat center where it's not the case anymore, but a retreat center I once visited by the ocean, they had no internet. And I says, yeah, but you have different waves here, because the waves, and it invites us into this rhythmic, into this more, we can kind of just come back to that more natural rhythm. And yoga and Ayurveda, they recognize that when we collaborate with nature, nature will collaborate with us. In the Gita, Krishna emphasizes this, that by honoring the forces of life, they will give back to you. So when we approach life with devotion, with presence, with reverence, life enriches us too. And I think a beautiful environment where we can step outside the vibrations of the city and the busyness of our day-to-day. When we step outside and we can, because when we do step into that type of environment, even if we've grown up in a city, there's something it resonates with deep inside. Like I've forgotten the name of the particular person who I heard speaking about this, but it might come to me. He was speaking about grief. And he said one aspect of grief that most human beings experience is on birth itself. Because when we emerge from the womb, we expect to find a community. We expect to have lots of aunts and uncles and siblings who are all happy we're here and we've arrived, and they welcome us into the circle of the village. And we expect also to feel this sense of connection to place. Even if we're a nomadic people, there's this sense of we are moving together. Oh, this is my village, whatever. And most of us don't have that type of birth. And so there's this grief, there's something that we are longing for, this sense of connection to the earth. So the earth, our mother. Now, some people think, oh, we get this is a woo-woo idea. No, we are born of nature. We are children of nature. If the sun wasn't shining and the planet Earth wasn't beneath us, we wouldn't have the existence we know. So we could say we're children of the earth and we're children of the light in terms of children of the sun. Without those forces, life as we know it would not be. And this earth is spinning and cycling. This is a cyclical existence. This is a pulsating existence. So what I've experienced I started doing retreats in places outside of cities before I went to the Spanish mountains. So over the last 15 years or so, whenever I've had chance to work with people in those types of environment, there's always this extra dimension. Like you suggested, Claire, it invites us we can create a place that is like when you're describing the snug and doing the type of work that might not be so accessible when we're in a busy place.
Mm.
So when we come into that place where we just exhale, perhaps, and root and ground, and when we're in the mountains and when the river is flowing and the sun is shining, it makes it that much easier to connect to the munificent, generous support of earth, water, fire, air, and space. That is also, they're parts of us and they're what's enabling the type of experience we have as human beings. And one thing I love about working in those types of environments, what I've experienced usually day by day, there's something opening, there's something relaxing. And it happens quickly in those types of environment where there is the sanctuary of the mountain. There are some mountains that I've experienced. They're domineering. They're almost fierce. They're intimidating. And then there's other mountains that they cradle us.
Yes.
Those type of mountains, there's the mountains. So there's not like dense population. The sound travels differently. And yet there is this feel, like you said, as a feeling of being held. And when it's just so beautiful, I mean, I think beauty is something we can practice. Like I'm speaking from Prague today, and Prague is, as far as cities go, in my experience, Prague is a lovely place to be because there's so much beauty in walking across the bridge, and I look in one direction and the sun is bringing the gold that's on the top of the castle and it's sparkling in the sunlight. Or I look at a building, even looking at the pavement, the way it's constructed in places, there's beauty. And when I see the beauty, it brings a certain inspiration. But when we're in the mountains and in May, I think it can really help remind us of the deep reservoirs of beauty that are always accessible in this existence. And, in the world that we live in, one doesn't have to look very far to find things that are rather bleak, things that are rather horrific. We see, the types of horrific behavior that human beings are capable of. But I think to fortify ourselves against despair and to facilitate positive change, the acknowledgement, recognition, and cultivation of beauty on a day-to-day level in very simple ways is actually an empowering and very helpful practice. And I think the opportunity to be in an environment like that also allows us to engage with the teachings in a slightly different way, because these teachings all came from the observation of nature. And the rishis, those who understood these truths, these perennially valid teachings that have been distilled in the Yoga Sutra, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the text of the Yoga tradition, and in many other spiritual traditions as well, what they saw from observation. So one time I had the privilege of meeting Satish Kumar. I don't know, have you heard of Satish Kumar, Clare? Yeah, so maybe if you're listening, Satish Kumar, very interesting man. In his youth, this was, I think, back in the 60s, he was in India with one of his friends. They're young, they're in a Jain community, and they are feeling this outrage at the nuclear proliferation in the world. and they're in the coffee shop or the tea shop talking about all the trouble in the world. And they think, enough talking, we need to do something. And they go to their teacher and they say, we've got an idea. We want to walk to the capitals of the nuclear world. So we need to go to Moscow and Paris and London and Washington, D.C. And the teacher says, this is a wonderful idea. I fully support you to do this. But 2 things you need to do. Go with no money at all. Go empty and make every step a pilgrimage of peace. And they were in the northern part of India. The first country they had to go through was Pakistan, which at that time there was a lot of tension. And they said, oh, but teacher, if we're going to do it on foot, we have to go first through Pakistan. So can we make an exception? No. That's how you're going to do it. And they start off and they have this amazing experience. And when I met Satish, he was giving a talk on soil, soul, and society. But he speaks with such authority. I mean, he did this peace pilgrimage. He walked to the capitals of the nuclear world with his friend. They were met in each place by local groups who communicated their messages to the relevant authorities. But I mentioned Satish because at the day that I met him, he told many beautiful stories, but he told us that there's that image of the Buddha becoming enlightened sitting under a tree. And Satish told us that, you see, my mother used to tell me the Buddha didn't become enlightened sitting under a tree. He became enlightened because he sat under a tree. And the idea being that he observed nature deeply, and he took the time to do so. So for Satish's mother, she saw that one of the symbolic teachings represented in that iconic image is there's the tree, excuse me, which there's the tree, which roots down into the earth and grows up. It's this beautiful symbol of life. And the human being is sitting on the ground, rooting to the earth, connected to the sky, and is observing. And this is the beauty of yoga. It's not asking us to become anything we are not.
Yes.
It's not asking us to do anything outside ourselves. Everything that we need to explore with is right in and all around us. And when we come to an environment like the one we're going to be in, it facilitates a deepening and acceleration of that process. So I'm very enthused to be returning to a mountain setting. And I also love being outside. As wherever I am in my, like the physical movement side of yoga practice, I always try and do it outside. Sometimes that's not possible. I practiced inside a lot over the years, but so there's many, and over the years, I've had the chance to learn many things to expand my yogic practice toolkit. So I'll be sharing some of those things along the way, things we can do outside. I've got 5 minutes, I've got 10 minutes. It's things that I can do to invite energy and information to circulate smoothly, easily, healthily in my system. Things I can do to help me tune in and come into more rhythm. And we might also do, depending on the group, as you mentioned the Nissen and the possibility for more slightly vigorous or adventurous hiking. We'll do some very meditative hiking. So we'll play along a spectrum. We'll enjoy stillness and exuberant sound. We will sing, we will recite in Sanskrit, of course. We'll study the text, but we'll study the text when we are in the environment. It's not just that we'll be like, okay, look, so it's not that we'll be studying the book. We'll be studying the text, and the text is woven, it's all from life. So when we're out in the beautiful natural environment, this is going to inform our consideration of the text, our inquiry into the themes that it invites us to inquire into. So it will be a holistic program. There was whole life yoga, so it's about all of the human being, the physical aspect of us, our senses, our emotions, our intellect, our inquiring, reflexive capacities, all of these things.
Amazing. I mean, obviously I think it's going to be awesome, but I really do think it's going to be awesome. I'm super excited about the program because I think this combination of it's like the idea of working with a text. See, I've always struggled, like I don't like to I find it really uncomfortable calling the Yoga Sutras a text. I know it is a text, but sometimes I'm like, composition. It's like it's a treatise. It's exactly what you said. It's like we're not studying a text. We're not looking at a book. We're not looking, word by word. We're taking it and feeling it and living it and moving with it. And I think that I think it's a super program, and I really think it's an incredible space to be doing it in.
So please come and join us.
Yes, exactly. Come and find out how wonderful and fabulously gorgeous it is. Thank you so much.
Just one more thing I'd like to say,
Yes,
Claire, I'll try and be quick because I know we both have to go and teach. But the thing about the sutra not being a text, traditionally the way it's studied is always in practice.
Yes.
The sutra is so distilled that it becomes a mnemonic. It's like we could see, for example, the life I have led since I have been in school, I have not had much cause to use mathematical equations in my day-to-day work. Of course, I'm benefiting from them anytime. The person who did the architecture for the building I'm staying in, they used it, of course. But in my own day-to-day, it's not that I'm recalling formulae. But people who work in engineering, they probably have many formulae that they know by heart, but then they can apply them in so many different ways. So this is like the Yoga Sutras. The idea we dive into the text, and then with those ideas vibrant, alive in our awareness, and then we apply them, we explore them in life. And then over time, they become installed more and more deeply into the fiber of our being. And eventually, hopefully, step by patient step, they get woven into the fabric of our being to the degree that we weave ourselves back into the unity that really is the heart of who we are. But we do that step by patient step, and the opportunities to explore with a group in a beautiful environment is definitely super helpful. So thank you, Claire. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Thank you, James.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.